Welcome to Second Act Travels, the podcast for curious midlife explorers ready to trade crowded summers for smart, meaningful, off-season adventures. If you're over 50 and dreaming of meaningful travel that fits your freedom and your budget, you're in the right place. I'm Elizabeth, and each week I'll bring you tips, stories, and inspiration to help you travel deeper, go further, and embrace your second act with confidence. Welcome back, everyone. This is part 2 of our series on how to walk the Thames Path National Trail. For those of you who missed part 1, you can go back to the previous podcast. The Thames Path National Trail is a very easy long-distance trail for beginners. It's mostly flat. It runs approximately 200 miles from the source of the Thames River in the Cotswolds up to and through London and ending at the North Sea. As promised, we will talk about the packing list if you want to do a long-distance hike, specifically from inn to inn. Now, this means that you're not tenting, you're not camping, you're not wild camping. You are actually walking between towns, and when you finish your stage at the end of the day, you'll check into a pub or a bed and breakfast or a hotel, whatever is to your liking, and then you get up the next day and you'll walk the next stage. I pretty much followed the Trailblazer guides walking the Thames Path because I liked the way they broke it down into certain stages. And it has stages if you're having a quick walk or if you're at a more relaxed pace. Of course, I was probably at the slowest pace possible, but I did get to see everything that I wanted. So I took my time and really enjoyed everything. Packing for the Thames Path can be a lot of fun, actually. It's sort of neat to be able to carry everything on your back, everything you need and nothing you don't. And I kept my backpack to around 13, 14 pounds. In general, the rule is not to exceed more than 10% of your body weight. Sometimes I think that's possible, sometimes it isn't. But I'll share my packing list with you, and you can adjust it to your own needs. So here we go. The Thames Path is really different from some of the other national trails in the UK because you are so close to civilization almost entirely throughout the hike. In the beginning of the hike, it is definitely a quieter stretch of England, but I think the longest that you ever go between towns is 11 miles, and that's only one time. Usually the towns are about 7 miles apart, sometimes 5. Obviously, you go through towns more quickly the further you go towards London. So you'll always have great cell reception. You'll always be able to call for help if you need it. You'll always be able to call home if you need it. There are plenty of towns along the way. There will also be plenty of food and water along the way, so you don't need to carry gallons of drinking water. I carried a 2-liter drinking pouch, and I would fill it up probably with about a liter and a half, just so that I didn't add too much weight to my backpack. And I would carry lunch with me, but, a piece of fruit and, maybe a roll or something. I didn't usually eat a big lunch. Either way, if I got hungry, I could easily stop at a town, pubs all along the way. What's also great about that is that there's transportation in between towns. So if you accidentally step into a really muddy patch and you're wet up to your knees, you can stop walking, get transportation, and take it to your final destination. Buses are plentiful, as are cabs, Uber as well. Don't be afraid to try this hike because there's plenty of rescue options should you need it. Okay, so you decided that you want to hike the Thames Path National Trail, and you're saying, but where do I start packing? I have no idea what to bring. I can help with this. It's most helpful to divide up packing into 3 separate categories: hiking wear, non-hiking wear street clothes, and non-clothing items. And we'll go through the list one by one. Some of the things that I brought might not interest you or might not apply to you. That's okay. You may have a different idea, and I'd love to hear about it if so. The first thing I started with, and let's assume for the purpose of this hike that you're going to do it in the off season because you can travel any time of year and you don't want to have a really crowded trail. And I should also mention that the Thames Path can be hiked any time of year. However, the later in the winter you go, there might be more flooding on the trail. But I also can give you a resource in the show notes that will give you day-to-day bulletin of flooding alerts in England. So I'll put that in the show notes. All right, back to hiking wear. The first thing that I packed is long underwear, a very lightweight pair, but long underwear nevertheless. As it turns out, I didn't need it. I tend to just get really warm while I'm walking nonstop. I brought it, but I didn't need it. If you run cold, you might want to bring it. For hiking, I also brought a long sleeve activewear shirt. I just went to Target and I bought something that was appropriate to sweat in and maybe get a little worn while you're hiking. So I bought a long sleeve activewear shirt, and I also brought a lightweight Henley long sleeve shirt. If it was an extremely warm day, warm being relative to November, I might just wear my Henley long sleeve shirt or a long sleeve shirt. I took one medium weight hoodie, nothing too bulky because I didn't want it to take up too much room in my backpack, but it would keep me warm. I brought 2 pairs of hiking pants, and it's really important that you have 2 pairs because if you do what I did and stepped into the mud all the way up to your knees, you're going to want a dry pair to use the next day. So 2 pairs of hiking pants, 3 pairs of hiking socks. These should be quick dry and moisture-wicking. The worst thing that can happen is you wear wet socks and you will get blisters that way. So I always have a pair of dry socks. I brought 3 pairs with me and 3 pairs of underwear, of course. Then I brought a windbreaker. This was not a very fancy windbreaker, but it was lined and it also had a hood. I also went to REI and I was fitted for walking boots, and I highly recommend that you invest in a really good pair. I know that there are people that walk the Thames Path with sneakers or trainers. I'm not sure that that's the easiest thing to do or the best thing to do. Let's put it that way. I used my walking boots. I made sure they were waterproof and made sure they fit properly. And that's why I was fitted especially for it. So you might have an outdoor clothing store that is near you. Feel free to go and get them fitted correctly. And the last thing I used every day while hiking is my pair of walking poles. I invested in a good pair of walking poles. What's important is that they collapse and that also they can have some adjustability in their height. I used walking poles that I bought through REI, and I'll certainly put the link to those because I thought they were just fantastic and they held up well, and I still use them for every single walk. Now, believe it or not, that's all I used when I was hiking for hiking clothes. Let's talk about street clothes. Those also went into my backpack, but I did not pack a lot. Again, I packed a pair of lightweight sneakers for after hiking, especially if your hiking boots got wet that day's stage. It's helpful to have a pair of lightweight shoes. It could be, I use Keds sneakers. You could use a pair of flats or whatever works for you, just a pair of lightweight shoes. A pair of jeans or an extra pair of long pants. I brought one of those for after I finished the hike. I brought a pair of pajamas. So I just brought something very lightweight. And I also brought a shirt, just a long sleeve shirt to wear for dinner at the pub or something like that. That was all I brought for street clothes. Now, this is also a good time to mention outerwear, because if you're walking off season and in cool temperatures, you're going to have to bring some outerwear specific to the season. For example, a rain poncho. Actually, no matter what time of year in England, you should always prepare for rain. So a rain poncho is essential. It should fit over your backpack. And I don't think you need to bring an umbrella only because you will have the rain poncho. You also want to prepare for colder weather. So bring gloves and a hat and definitely sunglasses, because even though it will rain, it will also be periods of sun. Let's talk about some non clothing items. All right, so now we're at non clothing items, and here's where you get a lot of variation. I think you can decide whether I mentioned something that interests you and you think, hey, I should bring this. That's a good idea. Hadn't thought of it. Or you can decide to ignore it. Totally up to you. The first thing is, I think, something that probably a lot of over 50-year-olds have, which is a travel CPAP. I have sleep apnea. I have terrible sleep apnea. And I invested in a travel CPAP. It is less than 2 pounds. It has its own little carrying pouch, doesn't take up much room in my backpack. So I brought that along and I just plugged it in at night. But I made sure that I got a good sleep every night. And the CPAP definitely helps me do that. So if you have sleep apnea and you have a CPAP machine, you don't need to lug around that big thing. You can purchase something smaller. I also brought one emergency on-the-go toilet. So I went to REI or I went to a camping store and I just found a on-the-go emergency toilet that, just in case if I absolutely couldn't find a bathroom nearby, I had with me. It was really just more peace of mind. I never used it because towns are so frequent along the Thames Path. I did bring one though, just in case. I brought a journal and a pen. I did write every night after I finished my day's hike, how I was feeling, what I saw, what was interesting. Or you can just record it into your phone. That's fine. Toiletries, self-explanatory and definitely up to you. Obviously, make sure you have enough of your prescription medications or something like that. Even if I had left my luggage somewhere during the day, I always put my toiletries into the daypack because it had my medicine and everything else in it. And then that lastly was the collapsible daypack. And I use a New Outlander daypack. It collapses right down into something that's about 5 inches by 5 inches square. And it has 3 separate compartments, so you can put a lot of things in there. I don't feel that it's waterproof, and I don't really think it needs to be waterproof because I would just use a poncho if I needed it. But the collapsible day pack is an absolute must-have, especially if you're just going out at night and you just want to have some things with you. It can hold a bottle of water and things like that. So the New Outlander day pack, I used that every single time I went out as I got closer to London. So those were the non-clothing items. And altogether, my pack weighed between 13 and 14 pounds. But you also must figure that you have to add a couple of pounds for water. Water can be extremely heavy. And even though you don't need to carry a lot with you, you don't need to carry gallons and gallons because there are towns along the way and pubs and things. There are also places along the path where you can get drinking water. Water can be heavy. So I just had a 2-liter pouch that I bought and I filled it up to about a liter, liter and a half. And I would just make sure to fill that up when I stopped for lunch. But do know that even if the pack doesn't feel that heavy on mile 1, it might start to feel heavy by mile 6 or 7 or 10 or 12. Other thing that I carried is the Trailblazer Guide. I mentioned that in the first episode of this podcast, and I did something a little bit different. Rather than carry the whole guide with me, which is a couple of hundred pages, I just ripped out the sections that I needed. So I just took probably about 70 or so pages that I definitely wanted to have at the ready as my resource. And I ripped those out and I put them in my backpack. And as I finished the stage, I would leave those and recycle the pages. But that's a good way of not carrying more than you need to, but also making sure that you have the printed material that you need. Well, that's it for today's episode of Second Act Travels. I urge you to check out my blog, secondacttravels.com. There's a very in-depth article about in-to-in hiking and specifically hiking the Thames Path National Trail. Look forward to seeing you back soon. Thanks. So thanks so much for checking Second Act Travels out, and I'll see you back here soon.